In 1979, Egypt and Israel signed a peace treaty. But Israel's new accord with Egypt gave way to further discord with the Palestinians. Initially, Egypt had ruled out a peace with Israel unless it led to a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. In the end, Egypt gave priority to its own needs and didn't insist on Palestinian statehood. The PLO denounced the treaty and demanded that Israel recognize it as the official representative of the Palestinian people. From its bases in the Palestinian refugee camps and villages of Lebanon, the PLO launched continual rocket attacks on Jewish communities in northern Israel, and it attacked settlements in the West Bank and Gaza. And Israel responded with airstrikes on PLO bases. The PLO's rocket attacks continued, and in 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon and bombed Beirut, agreeing to stop only after the PLO was expelled. The 1982 Lebanon War produced a PLO defeat, but it gave rise to the Iranian-backed Hezbollah party and to Israel's ongoing conflict with Hezbollah fighters in the region. The war also led to a new strategy for Palestinian autonomy. In 1987, the Palestinian people themselves initiated an uprising. By the mid-1980s, an entire generation of Palestinians had grown up in refugee camps and lived under Israeli military rule in the territories. Disillusioned with the Arab states and with the PLO, and frustrated over Israeli presence in the territories, Palestinian rage boiled over on December 9, 1987. A grassroots Palestinian uprising, the Intifada, began in Gaza and spread through the Arab quarters of the West Bank. The violent demonstrations by the Palestinians and the Israeli army's harsh response to the Intifada resulted in deaths on both sides. The international community denounced Israel's response. In Israel, a movement called Peace Now, consisting of leftist groups, called for Israel to leave the territories. On the other side, right-wing groups insisted on Israel's rights in the territories. As the Intifada continued, Yasser Arafat's PLO began losing ground in Gaza to a young, fast-growing political faction known as Hamas. Hamas is an Egyptian-based Muslim Brotherhood movement bent on establishing an Islamist Palestinian society. Hamas's strongly Islamist ideology often puts them at odds with Fatah, which is more secular. Arafat's response to rivalry from Hamas was to announce in 1988 the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. He also issued a PLO Declaration of Independence and addressed the UN with a peace plan. Israel began negotiations with the PLO in 1991, which led to an accord 2 years later. In 1993, shortly after Yitzhak Rabin's government came to power in Israel, secret negotiations between Israel and the PLO began in Oslo, Norway. The Israelis chose the land for peace strategy that had worked with Egypt. At the time, almost 90% of the West Bank Arab population lived in or near major Arab cities and towns. The plan proposed that these population centers become Palestinian enclaves. This would allow most Arabs to be released from Israeli control. Following the same principle, 90% of the Jews in the West Bank would reside in Jewish enclaves. These Israeli population centers, geographically small in area, would become Israeli territory contiguous with the State of Israel. According to the plan, only 12,000 Jews, 10% of the Jewish population in the West Bank, would remain inside Arab enclaves. Jerusalem and the Old City would be under Israeli sovereignty, while Gaza in its entirety would become another Palestinian enclave. The signing of the Oslo Peace Accords by Arafat, Rabin, and Shimon Peres took place at the White House and was overseen by President Clinton. Under the first phase of the Accords, Israeli troops left Jericho and then Gaza. As the Palestinian Authority began to take control in Gaza and Jericho, Israel and Jordan moved closer to peace, and they signed a formal treaty on October 26, 1994. But the peace treaty between them had unexpected consequences for both the Palestinians and Israel. King Hussein of Jordan announced that he was terminating ties with the Palestinian Arabs living in the West Bank and revoking their citizenship status. Over 1 million Palestinian Arabs became stateless overnight. Israel's talks with the PLO continued, and a further agreement between them, often referred to as the Oslo II Accord, was reached on September 28, 1995. It was essentially an agenda for negotiations, with a 5-year plan to transfer authority in the West Bank and Gaza from Israel to a Palestinian government. During this 5-year period, further negotiations were to resolve the remaining issues, including the most difficult ones: Jerusalem, refugees, settlements, security arrangements, and borders. Meanwhile, Hamas militants who opposed the peace process were committing acts of terror in Israel which eroded support for peace among the Israeli population. And some Israelis became hostile to Rabin's initiatives. To them, the West Bank and Jerusalem represented the heart of biblical Israel and should be under Jewish dominion. On November 4, 1995, Yigal Amir, an Israeli university student opposed to the peace talks, assassinated Rabin. Israelis were deeply divided at this time. Many Israelis wanted to withdraw completely from the disputed territories. Others believed that Israel should permanently annex the territories. The Arab world was also divided. Some recognized the Jewish state, but most still refused to. Fortunately, more peace proposals were on the way. If you would like to explore more hot topics, our companion book is available at major online booksellers. You can also support the production of future For Critical Thinkers videos or download complimentary resources for teachers by visiting forcriticalthinkers.com.